Good morning. My name is David Gadsby. I'm a board member with the Council for Maryland Archaeology. I'm here today with Dr. Laura Masur of the Catholic University of America, and we're going to talk a bit about the essay that she wrote for Maryland Archaeology Month. Good morning, Dr. Masur.
Happy to be here today.
Would you tell us a little bit about where you work and what you do?
Sure. So I teach at the Catholic University of America, right in the heart of DC, in Northeast. So we're something like 2 miles from the Maryland border. So, you know, DC and Maryland certainly have their connections historically. Our campus, where you know, we've been doing an ongoing project, is formerly Maryland. So I teach, I work on ongoing projects, have a couple different projects ongoing.
Great. Can you tell us what is your favorite thing about your job?
I think what I like best is the variety. You know, we all fear the job where we're doing the same thing every day and you feel like it's kind of mindless, but when you're a professor, you know, you have a lot of variety. So I have research projects. I'm in the field sometimes, you know, a pretty small amount of the time relative to a lot of archaeologists. I, you know, run my own lab, and I spend probably at least half of my time teaching. So I'm working with, you know, the next generation of not just archaeologists, but citizens, people who are, you know, educated in you know, the world and will interact with archaeologists and archaeological sites as visitors and legislators and everything like that. And so and then there's always the various types of administrative tasks that we all hate, but we all have to deal with in any job.
Well, so how did you get involved in archaeology, and what keeps you involved in archaeology?
It's a good question. Yeah, I came at archaeology through history. So I always, you know, from a very young age, I always loved history. I loved American history. I was just fascinated by the past. And I thought about, you know, careers in history, but I took an intro to archaeology course my first semester of college, and I was absolutely sold from there. With you know, with Martin Gallivan at William and Mary, and it was just, you know, being able to go out. He took us out on site, I think my second semester, to Wero-Wicomico in Virginia, and it was just, yeah, I was sold from there. Something about the place of being at an archaeological site, that sense of place, that continues to be important to me today, because you're participating in the past. And certainly there's a lot of reasons to not stay in archaeology. It can be a tough career to be in. But for me, I think there's a real sense of connection to the past and to people, and then also that variety that comes into your career. The idea that, you know, as an archaeologist, you're looking at different aspects of history, and you have an opportunity to sort of rewrite parts of history that are perhaps not written in the most equitable ways. And so that's definitely a motivator to me. Working with community members is really incredible. And working with students is a lot of fun.
Yeah, that's a great answer. I will tell you, I also went to college not to be involved in anthropology, and after my first semester, I was hooked on archaeology, and I've been an archaeologist ever since. So I think it gets some of us early.
Yes. Oh yeah. And it's always fun to, you know, to teach those intro courses now and try and find those students who, right, you know, there's something that comes alive when you, you know, you sort of fall in love with the material aspect of the past.
Yeah, very true. Will you, to shift focus a little bit, will you tell us a little bit about your Maryland Archaeology Month topic, just so folks can have a little bit of a précis for what you've written in the booklet?
Sure. So the project that I've been working on now for about 10 years is looking at sites that were plantations owned by the Society of Jesus. So this is an order of Roman Catholic priests and brothers. And it seems a little bit unusual, right? There's, you know, wait, plantations owned by clergy, that's a little unusual, right? But this was actually really common, especially for the Jesuits, though they had to run their missions, and this was how they financed it. And what they have, the undertaking they had in Maryland was actually a lot smaller in scope and scale than what was going on, say, in Latin America and the Caribbean. The Jesuits are some of the largest slaveholders in the New World. And so looking at the project, there's been an incredible amount of archaeology done at these former plantation sites in Maryland over the years, most of it in compliance really with federal law. So one of the sites we've worked at, St. Inigo's, is Webster Field Annex. It's a place owned by the Navy. So when I came into the project, it was, looking at all of the archaeology that's been done since the 70s at these sites. Really, really incredible amount of archaeology, and then trying to knit that together. And what happened when we finally had the opportunity to dig is that, I said, it's time for descendants to have an opportunity to be involved. So if you followed the news of Georgetown and its relationship with slavery, a slave sale that happened in 1838, there's really been a reckoning there. And one of the outgrowths of that is the descendants have learned their histories, and sometimes these histories had been forgotten, and then have met each other, right? Have met all of their cousins. And so the project happened really at a serendipitous moment for connecting with so many descendants who were really being involved in tracking their own genealogies. And so we invited descendants to come out on site with us. They came in and dug. There was some really horrible weather. I think, summer of 21, it was like 90 to 100 degrees every day on site. And we had some really intrepid folks come out and work with us. And so it's really been an outgrowth from there. We've been working at a number of sites, and really over the past year, as we've wrapped up some of the domestic archaeology, we've been working on cemetery projects, because this is something very near and dear to a lot of descendants, really memorializing the places and finding the places where their ancestors are buried.
That is a very very cool program of research. I'd love to talk with you more about it at some point. At least not entirely, but at least partly because I used to live in the town of St. Inigo's, so I'm curious to hear about more
really?
about what you found there. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, that's what I'm doing this summer. I'm writing the book.
Oh, nice. So just one last question for you is about relevance. Why do you think that this is an important topic to talk about now?
When, one of the things that I ask my students, right, especially when I introduce historical archaeology, is, isn't this a really expensive way of just learning something that we already know, or, that we can know from historical documents? And what I always push myself is to ask is, what can we bring to the table that isn't already there, right? And one side of it is when you have sites that there's practically no documentation of what's going on in everyday life. And this is particularly true for the 17th century. So we don't know where buildings were. We don't know where people were living. We don't know exactly what their quality of life was like. Are people building these big brick mansions? Are people living in, post in-ground houses, wooden houses? And I think that's a relevant question when you're trying to judge, inequality, right? And the depth of inequality. And then obviously when we get into the period where in the late 17th, early 18th century, where slavery becomes the primary, economic mode, and tobacco planting, where enslaved persons are doing most of the labor, they're most of the people living the plantations. It's, where are they living, right? And these places, this is not well documented. And I think it's adding those details in with, questions from the present, right? So I'm always trying to figure out, what do modern day communities want to know? What do they care about? What makes, their ancestors' lives, often we can't identify exactly where their ancestors lived, right? But we can try and get some detail together, right? And paint a picture, right? And so it's trying to pull all those details together, and making the past relevant in the present. And so, it becomes a kind of, an opportunity to rewrite histories that are written, in the 19th century, that are, really quite racist, and ignoring these important aspects of history, and then bringing people's descendants, into the story as well. And so, I think that's what makes it important to me, and that's what motivates me, because it's a hard task. It's a lot of work, trying to do both the archaeology, and work with communities today.
It absolutely is. It's almost like it's two different jobs. But,
oh yeah.
But I know a lot of archaeologists take it on because it's important. So
yeah.
I appreciate that. Well, thank you very much for taking a few minutes to talk with me. I really appreciate it. I'm eager to learn more about what you're doing, and look forward to chatting more in the future.
Sure. My pleasure.